Hello and welcome to another edition of Veterans Corner. I'm Marshall Preston, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel retired, and your host for today's segment. Veterans Corner is an initiative of your Westboro Veterans Advisory Board and is graciously produced by our friends here at Westboro Television. The goal of Veterans Corner is to share pertinent information on topical issues that may affect our veterans, families, residents, and our friends within our community. It's also an opportunity to spotlight local veterans, and we seek to share some of their experiences and stories to highlight their service and continued civic contributions to the community at large. And by doing so, we hope to educate the community of the variety and breadth of experiences that veterans have, and perhaps break down some of the assumptions, biases, or stereotypes that we may hold on to consciously or unconsciously. To that end, we're quite fortunate to have Tony Pittman, Command Sergeant Major, U.S. Army retired, with us today. And I'm looking forward to that conversation. We're filming today on Halloween, so happy Halloween 2025.
Happy Halloween, yeah.
Well, welcome. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So Tony Pittman, 45 years old. I had 20 years of service. I went in right out of high school in '99, retired in 2019. I was a Command Sergeant Major the last 5 years of my career. Very lucky to make it where I did. Did 6 deployments, different countries, a few to Afghanistan, a couple to Iraq, and then Philippines, and then various other countries I visited. In total, 22.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll start from the beginning. Where were you born and raised?
So I grew up here in Massachusetts. Born in Norwood. Grew up in Canton. Last few years before I joined the military, we moved to Attleboro. Graduated out of Attleboro High School. Got a metal fab certificate. They're a vocational type school. On the fence of what I wanted to do out of high school, but for some reason I just had a calling of, got to join the military. I was opposed to it all the way until my senior year, and just kind of out of nowhere, I just had to do it.
Any family connections to it?
Some cousins that had joined, years prior, they had all been out. Nobody really close that had joined or anything like that. It was. I just remember when I was a young kid, 4th, 5th grade, whatever it was, the Gulf War was going on, and we did pen pals with soldiers, and there was a major that I penned back and forth, and for whatever reason that just stuck out, his service, and there's nothing special about what we talked about or anything, it just stuck out, and I just felt like there was a calling, I just had to do it.
Cool.
So.
Was your family supportive, a little nervous?
No, they were totally against it, wanted me not to go. All the way up until the end, they were asking me if I was sure this is what I wanted and all that. And but I remember my parents taking me to the recruiting station in, I think it was Norton. They dropped me off there. It was a pretty emotional day. It was first time leaving home, all that type of stuff. It was, but little nervous, a little scared, a little sad, but super excited. It was a wild time.
And then you got to basic training.
Yeah, and the basic training is basic training. They break you down and build you back up. I was fortunate enough that when I joined, I told the recruiter, they asked what I wanted to do. I said, I want to blow stuff up and I want to jump out of planes. So I got the opportunity to do that. Started out as a 12 Bravo combat engineer. Okay. So we learned how to build and destroy stuff. And then I got to go to airborne school right after basic training in AIT. So that was pretty cool.
That is very cool. That signals that you were doing pretty well then.
Yeah, I was very excited about it. It was part of my contract, so I got to go no matter what happened. But just going through airborne school at such a young age, it teaches you something very different about the Army that the rest of the Army that doesn't go doesn't experience. Not that we're better, but we're absolutely better.
So all right. So tell me some of the highlights of that particular training.
So airborne school is...
How many jumps do you do? What types? All static line?
So airborne school is broken down into 3 phases. So you have ground week, which is you run everywhere you go. And then they teach you some of the basic stuff that you'll need to know about falling out of a plane. And then the next week you have tower week, where you learn how to fall. So you'll fall from various heights, 6 inches up to 5 feet. And they teach you how to fall correctly so that you can kind of roll without breaking anything, or at least that's the idea. And then the last week is jump week. You do 5 jumps. A A couple of them are combat equipment where it's very light. It's training, so there's nothing too excessive there, but it's scary as hell. Backing up just a little bit, that second week, tower week, you jump out of a 34-foot tower. They say that the 34-foot mark is like where your brain kind of turns on and off whether or not you should do it. And I remember the first time going out of that, I was just scared as hell. I looked at the drill sergeant, or the black hat, and I said, I can't do it. He goes, you gonna do it or you're getting kicked out? I said, just push me out of the door. So I'm holding on to reserve, and he pushes me out of the door, and I go flying. And then after that, I was fine.
Yeah.
It scared me every time I did it, but you know, I was able to do it after that every time. A lot of fun.
I have jumped out of a plane for pleasure a couple times. I've got a very good friend who it's one of his passions, so he's talked me into going with him a couple times.
Yeah, I was lucky after that. I mean, they sent me to Fort Bragg, so I did 19 of my 20 years at Fort Bragg, which is kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
You know, some people will do close to that, but a lot don't. I was fortunate as I got to jump my 19 of the 20 years, so it was pretty awesome. So I ended up somewhere around 110 jumps. I don't really remember. It's I tracked my log up to 100, and then after that I kind of didn't care, and I just did what I had to do to just make my proficiency jumps for every year.
Okay.
And that was it. But fun career, loved it.
Okay. 82nd out of Fort Bragg.
No, so at first I was in 37th Engineers. They were a corps
that's right.
asset, so under 20th Engineer, or 20th Engineer Brigade, but under 18th Airborne Corps.
Okay.
So I did that for 5 years. That's where I got my first deployment to Iraq for the invasion and all that stuff. And then at the end of that, I had orders to go to Italy. I went to BNOC, which is one of the enlisted kind of educational systems that they have for E6s. So I went there. When I was there, they canceled my orders to Italy for some reason. And then I was asked to go to civil affairs. It was something that was primarily being run by special forces guys, but they were trying to pull other people into it with the wars kicking off and everything ramping up. They wanted SF to do more of their own job and other people to kind of cover down on the civil affairs stuff. So a bunch of us from Fort Bragg that had combat experience, leadership experience, you know, we were jump masters, those type of things. They asked us to come over or put us on orders to go. And then once we got there, we got to volunteer to stay and do whatever we wanted there. And that's kind of where I did the next 15 years of my career. I stayed in civil affairs. Such a high op tempo, just deploying all the time. It seemed like every year to 18 months I was going out the door somewhere. So it was,
Okay.
time just went by super fast. All of a sudden I looked up and I was at like 15 years. I was like, holy crap, staying for 20, I guess. So.
Yeah. So let's not go too fast. Talk to me about sort of what rank were you and where were you for the invasion of Iraq? How did that come about? What were you thinking? What were the type of intel?
So in 2001, I was with a girlfriend. We went to Arkansas, visit her family, and then 9/11 happened while I was out in Arkansas. So we were fighting to get back across country as quick as we could to get back to Bragg. We wasn't sure what was going to happen. Our unit couldn't really tell us anything other than just get back as soon as you can. So we got back. Again, they said, you know, at some point we're going to deploy. We just don't know when. And I had already decided I was getting out of the Army at that point. I was, I think, 11 months out. I was going to work for the Attleboro Fire Department. I was working at a funeral home in Attleboro. I was going to go back to doing that stuff. But I just had that calling. There was no way I could leave the unit I just trained with for the last 3 years and then just leave them when I knew they were going to go to combat. So I decided to stay. I think it was 10 or 11 days after 9/11, I signed up for another 3 years. And then eventually, 2 years later, we went to Iraq for the invasion.
Okay.
My platoon, we took a boat over to Iraq, which is kind of weird. We did security for all the equipment that was going over. We had 2 different boats, one platoon on one, the other on the other.
Civils? Commercial?
Yeah, they were commercial boats. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was merchant marines. So we rode with them, really just to do the security through the straits. Open ocean didn't really matter, but
Into Kuwait? What was the port?
yeah, poured into Kuwait. Yeah. So we were on the boat for about 30 days.
Yeah.
Took us 2 weeks to get over there, and then we just kind of circled until it was our turn to get in and unload.
Yeah.
But the war had kicked off right before we had got on shore.
Where in Kuwait?
Arifjan is
Yep.
where I know one of the places that we started, and then I think it was New Jersey is where we camped out for a while, and then we went over the berm from there. And then we made a couple of trips back and forth. Everything happened so quick that there just wasn't enough supplies up north, so it was. We ended up making a few trips back down to Kuwait to grab water, food, those type of things. Really just convoy stuff for life sustainment up in the Mosul area where we stayed for that initial
All right,
push.
so you pressed past Baghdad.
Yeah.
Any engagements in Baghdad?
We did not. There was stuff right in front of us, but we missed most of that, and then we pressed into Mosul, and that's where I spent a good amount of time there, mostly just rocket attacks, those type of things in that area, and then we kicked out to Erbil
I was about
to
to ask.
pull security for our LE, our light equipment guys, to rebuild the FLS, the flight landing strip for planes to start landing in there. Much more secure area, easier for State Department bring things in and out, that type of stuff.
Okay. How long were you in country for?
I think it was 13
2003-ish?
months. Yeah, so we left, it was the end of January, I think, and then we got back, it was, I think February, end of February, early March, somewhere in there. I don't remember the exact date, but it was right around 13 months when I got back.
Trying to think of questions that others ask us. What type of rations? What type of food?
Yeah, so the initial days that first hit up until June, we went, I think, 40 days without running water or showers or anything like that. So we were using like 5-gallon pails. One dude up on a ledge, another guy below, drop a little water on him, let him swish up, and then rinse them off.
Yeah.
So it was that type of stuff for the first few weeks. And then MREs, the same MREs over and over. Eventually we got some T-Rats, which sounds nice, but it's just a big can that you got to cut open, and they just heat it in boiling water. It's like not very good food, but we were excited to get it because it was different than MREs for a while.
Yep.
And then at the end of May, in Mosul, a lot of people that were in Iraq at the time will remember it, but we were living in a ammo supply point, and the way we got rid of human waste back then was burn it with diesel fuel and whatever else. Well, a young private was burning some human waste in a field in the middle of the largest ammo supply point in Iraq. And of course he was doing it around tall grass, so the tall grass lit on fire. We had just come back from a mission, so we were all like stripping gear off, stripping clothes off. Most of us were standing around in just our BDU pants or DCU pants. And then all of a sudden rounds just started landing all around us, and it's from internal. There's no primer in most of them, so it's just these big, 50 to 100 pound shells just kind of falling all around us. We quickly figured out what was going on and tried to get as much stuff out as we could. My platoon lost everything. Our building got collapsed in on. The only thing I was able to pull out of that building was my box that had all my tobacco in it, which was great. So that was a huge win for the platoon, but we didn't have anything. I got pictures of one of my friends, Chris Twaddell. I haven't talked to him in years, but he wearing a shirt, "We'll work for clothes." 'Cause we had no clothes, and he's a huge guy, and he's wearing a shirt that would have fit me. I'm a small dude. And he's got this tight thing on and just "We'll work for clothes" walking around Iraq. It was just funniest thing.
Perfect. Gotta have a sense of humor, and yeah.
Oh yeah, at the time all of it is just crazy, but when you go back and look at it, those are the moments that you wouldn't trade for anything. That's where everything really happened. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. You're 24-ish at this point. 23, 22.
Yeah, 23, I think. Yeah, just about this. I had turned 23, I think, while we were in Iraq.
Okay.
And then I come back from that. I get the orders to go to civil affairs. It was about a year later. And
Are you able to call home? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Any significant other, mom, dad?
So at that time, it was just my parents, not really anybody steady. I did have a girlfriend that she ended up deploying with us. She was a soldier as well. So I got to see her every few months while I was there. But no, just calling back to my parents kind of whenever I could. Initially, that first, up until May, June timeframe, it was somewhat limited on phone calls. We had to wait for trailers to be put in that would have phones and all that type of stuff. We had like an emergency. We could make calls from the radios back to the States. but you could do like one a week, something like that.
Yep.
And you were limited to like 5 minutes. So
Yep.
I always skipped it because I was just calling my parents. I wanted the guys that were calling their wives and stuff like that to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I was young then. I mean, I had only been in the Army 3 years. I was E5 at 2 years, so I would have been an E5 in Iraq. I did my E6 board while we were there. I didn't pin E6 until we got home. But I was a young leader just trying to figure out how to be a leader and figure out combat stuff and being scared and just everything. So it was a wild time.
At that point, are there any particular leaders or styles that you're seeing that you're starting to go, I like that, I don't like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had, at that point, I had already had 3 different squad leaders prior to me being a squad leader. So I saw some really good things from them. I saw some really bad stuff from one of them. And I had an idea of how I wanted to do things, but I screwed up a lot of things as a young guy, just trying to figure out what worked for me. Most people in the military, they try the tough, hard-nosed stuff first because that's what we all know. It's the easiest. And I tried that, and it was not effective. It's not the best way to lead or, get the most out of people.
Yeah.
I learned that pretty quick. I mean, it was a rough deployment for some of that, but also just for new to combat for the whole unit and all that stuff. So it was just different.
Okay. All right, so you come back early
Early 04.
04.
Yeah.
E6.
I pinned E6 over the summer, so we would have got back, somewhere around March 04. I pinned E6 probably June, July.
Okay.
August, I go to that school. They tell me I'm not going to Italy after that, which I was really disappointed in. And then I think it was February I got the orders to go to Civil Affairs, so it would have been June 05 is when I went to Civil Affairs, trained for the MOS for 9 weeks. And then end of September, I get to my unit, Bravo 97th, start training up to go to Afghanistan. So originally they were supposed to go to the Philippines, but then they were switching out to give the company that kept going back and forth to Afghanistan a break. So this company took on the Afghan mission, so we prepped for that from September to December, and then January we went out the door. I went to like South Central Afghanistan. Darawud was the name of the place. It was a wild experience. There was a 12-man team, a 4-man team, 3-man team, and a 2-man team. That was it on the whole base in the middle of nowhere. We had periods of time, 45 days up to 7-8 weeks where we couldn't get aircraft to come in because of the weather. That was before we had all the little clusters of bases all around Afghanistan. So your flight windows were really narrow. They didn't have a lot of resupply options. So it's going to sound kind of crazy, but I got so sick of lobster. All we had for I think 6 weeks was lobster, and it was frozen lobster tails, and it was we had it 3 times a day, unless you wanted to eat MRE. So it was like, oh, I'm gonna have MRE. I don't want any more crappy lobster. I think for like 3 years after that deployment, I didn't eat lobster.
Okay. All right. Well, share with folks what does Civil Affairs do? What is the training?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
were you all organized and geographically aligned and therefore language trained?
Yeah. So Civil Affairs basically is they liaise between civilians on the ground and any government agency, whether that's host nation government, our government, our State Department, whatever it is. We'll work hand in hand with basically everybody in country. We're in a lot of countries that don't have conflict going on, mostly countries that don't have conflict, and we're kind of setting the stage or just getting the information of what's going on there. We do help some with redevelopment, that type of stuff. That's not our priority for the active side of Civil Affairs. The reserve side, they focus a little bit more on that type of thing. For us, it's more about who are the players, who's doing what.
Would you categorize as human intelligence?
No, I think they work closely with intelligence. There's a lot of things that they would go after that Intel would be very interested in where they're going, what they're doing, and most of the time those things are lined up. they're a military entity with a military objective. And our civil affairs units are all regionally aligned. So I was aligned to PACOM, so throughout Asia is where our focus was. I did one deployment to Asia and then a couple of small trips. The rest of it was all in the sandbox, so I didn't get to do a ton of it. When I went, it was at the beginning stages of when civil affairs was starting to turn into its own active duty MOS. So they were ironing out what all the requirements were. So I was grandfathered not having to do a language. And part of that was, at one point I had an option to go to language training, but I was in the situation again, the guys I went to Afghanistan with, that first trip, very soon after we came back, 9 months later, we were going out the door again to Iraq. So instead of going to Iraq, I had the option to go to language school if I wanted to. But again, I couldn't leave the guys I just deployed with, and we were very close. We're still close. So we all made the decision, hey, you know what, I don't care about language, we're going to war. Like we're gonna go fight. So I skipped out on that. I did do some Spanish training later on just to kind of have some proficiency in a language. When I got higher up in rank, I'm 89, I just didn't want to be one of the only people without a language.
Yeah.
E9's, your job is to enforce the standard, so it was, I got to have the base standard. Yeah. So I did do that eventually, but that wasn't until 5 or 6 years after I'd been in the branch. Yeah.
Okay. How long was the Afghan deployment?
The first one was 9 months. We went January to September.
Okay.
So it was a long trip. We had a little bit of troubles at the beginning, just with some leadership on the team, that type of thing. We ended up switching out a couple of people, and those last two guys that came in were the ones that I stayed really close with. And we really got to get a lot of good stuff done during that deployment. I learned a ton about what my job was in the military as far as civil affairs, all that type of stuff. First time doing it. So it was,
okay.
Got to work with State Department, worked with a bunch of different U.S. entities that was really cool to be a part of, work with a bunch of different NATO special operations, doing some cool things. So that was a ton of fun.
Were there any programs that you've thought you could see had some progress and was getting some traction? And I'm asking because one of my deployments was Shindan, up in the sort of western part of Afghanistan, and at that airfield you could see some remnants of an old sort of beekeeping initiatives that the State Department had done, and then some sort of fish.
I remember the beekeeping stuff.
Yeah,
I do.
So, were there any ones that you all participated in, or that thought were helpful?
So my next deployment was to Afghanistan again. So I did Iraq, Afghanistan, then Afghanistan again. This time I went with 1st Special Forces Group out of Washington State. It's the 1 year I didn't live at Fort Bragg. I moved out to Washington State. I was supposed to be there 3 years, but while I was there I got selected for promotion again, so I only did a year. Anyway, I went to Afghanistan with those guys, and during that rotation, they started a program for, who was it? I forget what they called it, but it was living in the villages with the people, developing the ALP, Afghan Local Police, I think is what they called it. Okay. Where special forces teams were living out in the village with the people, training a local security force to take care of their own community, not having to rely on the police to come in or the Afghan army, that type of thing. So it was to really secure themselves with some backing from the U.S. So we provided a few different things. That was where it kicked off. That was 2010. Myself and the guy I was working with, Dave Henning, he was a captain, made major, I think, on that trip, maybe the next one. But we developed kind of how to source these guys or source their equipment. So we figured out ways that we can get them vehicles, we can get them vests to hold their equipment, all that type of stuff, using some of the Commander's Emergency Relief Funds that we had out there. And our success that we had there kind of spread across the whole country. And then that program was able to develop significantly. And when I came back in 2013, I was working up at the NATO headquarters for special operations. So it was called NSOC Alpha. I worked there, and one of the programs that they were running, or element that they had there, was to oversee that program I was talking about a minute ago, where with the local security. So that program had grown significantly, where now it had its own command structure to look out for it, its own everything. So it was really awesome to see how, something that was being thought of and kind of growing, being a part of it at the very beginning, and really having some good success with it, and then leaving for a few years, coming back and seeing how big it had grown. It wasn't because of what we did, but we had a part in it.
Yeah.
So it was just really cool to see how significant it was, and a lot of the strides that the Afghan people made themselves to just be better for themselves. So that was pretty fun.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're back in in Iraq. Do you want to compare and contrast Iraq and Afghanistan?
Yeah. I mean, what I've told everybody that didn't have any military service is, significant difference between Iraq and Afghanistan. Iraq, when we got there, they had normal buildings, they had structure, they had government, they had everything, they had essential services. They weren't the best. I mean, they absolutely could be improved, no question. But they had things that were in place that were working. Afghanistan, most of that country did not. If you're in, some parts of Kandahar, sure, they had some built-up areas. Excuse me. Kabul, absolutely built up, nice place, or nicer place compared to the rest of the country. But when you talk about the rest of the country, I mean, they're still living in mud huts. They're still, Bedouins, just, people that just transient. They don't really live anywhere. They, farm sheep, and they kind of go across the country. So they didn't have a structure. They didn't have a lot of the things that Iraq had. And I know it was, back, 60s, 70s when they did have some more of that type of structure. But even then it was, Afghan, they've always known war, and that's about it. Where Iraq had some sort of structure that they could build on. So the need to be in Iraq and Afghanistan, I think, was both there to a certain extent. But I always have said that we needed to be in Afghanistan a lot longer than we needed to be in Iraq.
Yeah. Okay. The second deployment to Iraq, where were you? What was the mission and the focus?
So that was we went for what they called the surge. So it was they wanted to surge a bunch of troops to Iraq, specifically
Is
like
this
Baghdad.
Petraeus' surge, or is this?
It was,
okay.
yeah. So for the Baghdad area,
Yep.
try to saturate that, get rid of all the bad dudes that were there. What was his name? I think Hussein Hani was the one in Baghdad that they were trying to get out of there. But our job was, we went, instead of going on the special ops side this time, we went supporting conventional. We went with a striker unit, or we met up with a striker unit, and we were supporting them. We were running missions 6 days a week, going out, anywhere from 2 to 6 hours a day. Our job there was just to get out and meet as many people as we could, try to gain as much information on our area that we were assigned, Haifa Street in Baghdad, get as much information as we could, meet as many people as we could. The strikers, their unit, they wanted presence. That was the biggest thing they wanted. They wanted patrols all day long. One, it prevented people from putting IEDs out on the roads. Two, it got people more comfortable, the locals more comfortable with us just being there. We had a successful deployment. Nobody got hurt. We didn't get into anything too crazy. It was fairly short, I think 5.5 months, something like that. It was a good trip, very different from what I had done the 2 previous trips. But it was another one that was just in the books. I was happy it was done and moving on.
Any local Iraqis that you recall and had a relationship with, or?
Yeah, we had the first one, a guy named Sonny that was on the airfield up in Erbil that he would run into town and get us local food. So it was, instead of us eating the T-Rats and all the other stuff that we were always eating, he would run into town on days that, I'd be on the airfield doing security with my squad. he'd run down and we'd get these chickens that were just kind of flayed open and put over an open fire, and then you just eat those. But it was amazing food. And that dude he was great. He was awesome. And then the next trip to Iraq, a couple of great interpreters that just did a lot of stuff for us. Made some pretty tight relationships with them. And then Afghanistan, probably one of the closest guys I got to communicate with. I worked with them twice while I was there, 2 different deployments. So it was cool to, see him once, and then a few years later see him again in a different part of the country, in a place where he was much safer than what he was doing prior. And just watching what some of those interpreters would do for us, knowing that their life is on the line every single day, and especially once we leave, they're really on the line. I was just impressed with their willingness to support what we had going on. And I would say that about all the interpreters that we had, even the bad ones that I didn't like. They still risked a lot to help us and be part of the cause. So I've always given them probably the most credit.
Yeah. Yep. They had a lot on the line.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough too. Last year, I saw on Facebook that one of the hotels here was having a bunch of Afghan refugees. They were looking for people to help teach English. So I went and did that for like 8-9 months until the program went away. But that was super rewarding to meet some families and hear their stories. One of them was they were on the airfield, that plane that we keep seeing taking off on the news and all that. They were on the airfield. They were supposed to be on that plane. They didn't make it. The dad, he was the interpreter. He ended up having to hide for 2 years while his family went and lived with his parents. So he kind of bounced all around Afghanistan for 2 years. Eventually they made it out. 5 or 6 countries later, they made it here. But just hearing their story about what they went through and everything that they risked is just, it's crazy to know what those guys went through, and it's just very impressive to see how far they've come and what they've done with their lives to even make it here.
Yeah, it was, as you point out, I remember my second deployment was to Pakistan and sort of flying over Afghanistan into it and sort of looking down and realizing, much of this population is living transient, subsistence farming,
right?
Mud huts and no running water, no power, etc. And I was like, how is it that we are at war amongst this country, and who convinced them that we are devil incarnate and
right.
and mobilized this, and then you get to meet them, and it becomes much more local, much more focused. And,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I remember, I can't tell you how many times, I gave a little kid chocolate for their first time, and stuff like that just kind of sticks with you. And when you, as a soldier going into, all right, I'm getting ready for deployment, all right, I got to get into warrior mentality, I want to kill everything, I'm just ready to go. But then when you get there, you get on the ground and you have that human aspect, that human connection with so many people. Exactly the same thing that you said is, how are we doing this? What is happening? How do we get to this level where half this country thinks we're bad, half this country thinks we're great? Where's that line? How do we fix this?
Yeah, and it can turn on a dime.
Absolutely.
Back to Shindan, maybe it was Farah, but again, we were sort of near the wire at the airfield, and we're sharing some notebooks and pencils with the school kids that knew we were there and would come up and engage. And then you sort of come back and you get a threat briefing, like everyone needs to all their battle rattle on all times. Hearing it from the guy that's walking around with nothing, and you're going, I can't.
Yeah.
This is either real and you need to be doing it too, or what I'm seeing out there isn't quite matching the picture.
Exactly.
But it can turn on.
Yeah, I mean, so we would do these things called med camps where, the people that I was with in Afghanistan most of the time were some sort of special operations, whoever they were. So very highly trained medics, all that type of stuff. We would bring doctors, all that. And we'd go out into these villages and we'd set up a makeshift clinic for the day, and we'd invite people in, maybe have a specialty on something. and we would help hundreds of people. People would travel, days at a time to get to where we were so that they could get fixed. It's the only opportunity they'd get to see a doctor. And we would, by the end of every time, we would be getting word of, there's a Taliban guy just outside where we are, and they're stealing everybody's medicine that they're leaving with, and they're planning an ambush for us on the way out. And it's like, all right, what are we doing here? Like, we're trying to do the good stuff, not just the bad stuff. And it's just kind of mentally struggling with that was tough, because it was everybody wanted to help, and I was like, how are you going to stab me in the back when we're done with this? Like, what the hell are you doing? Mm-hmm. So it was. That was a balance that was hard to figure out, and then just seeing some of the craziness that you would run into, because we built a clinic right outside our FOB in Afghanistan, and we had random people coming up all the time, and it was just trying not to put our cultural norms on them was very difficult. We had a guy come in with his daughter. She got kicked in the face by a mule. So he brought her in to get fixed up. Our medic did a great job stitching her together. Everything was good. He came back like 10 days later, like, hey, that scar's still there. We're like, yeah, no kidding, it's gonna be there. It's like a big horseshoe ring on her face. So he brought her back 3 days later. This time she fell down the stairs. Come to find out, he smashed her in the face with the butt of a rifle, and it was very tough not to react to that. When the interpreter told us what really happened, that was a struggle. So kind of going through some of those type of things and not being an American when those things are happening to respond to it was not easy. Yeah. I think that was probably the hardest stuff I've been through, as opposed to all the fighting and everything else. Like, that was probably the most significant thing for me.
And well, I guess my next question is, now you're rising in rank and responsibility, and I'm hoping and sort of assuming that at some point you are now teaching and sharing some of these experiences to your soldiers and the next generation. Yeah.
So after the second trip to Afghanistan, I come back promoted to E8, very quickly go into a first sergeant position. And then, there's a Philippines trip in there somewhere. Okay. Earlier on.
Good one.
Yeah, I'll talk about Philippines in a minute. But,
okay.
I get back from the second trip to Afghanistan, and I'm put into a first sergeant position. So now I'm very excited, super young guy. I'm 88 in 10 years, which is crazy. But I'm really excited because now I get an opportunity. I get a company that's my own. I can make sure that they're trained.
Did you just say you made E8 in 10 years?
I did.
Yeah. That is
yeah. Selected for E9 and 13. Like, I had a crazy fast career. I worked to
the audience. Only 1% of enlisted, actually make E9, and the normal rate is to do that at about 20 years, 18, 20 years.
20 to 24 is the
okay. So to do it 10 years accelerated is remarkable.
Very fortunate with timing, placement, and I worked my ass off. If there was a deployment that was coming up, like I've said, I volunteered for every deployment that came down. My last deployment to Afghanistan, I volunteered for that as well, and that was a 15-month one. That was a long one. Anyway, back to becoming a first sergeant. I super excited to just train my soldiers. I had a ton of combat experience at that point. And the mission we were going into was called a SIMSI mission. So it was, we were sending teams into different countries throughout Asia, 4-man teams, work out of the embassies, suit and tie every day, not doing the combat stuff, but I need to have them prepared to deal with combat in case that happens. So it's much different than what I was used to doing. So the tactical side of it, hands down, I got that, not a problem. But helping coach, teach, mentor, how to deal with embassy staff, how to deal with State Department, how to do all those type of things, I had to learn some stuff on my own first before I could do that. But I had a great commander that I worked with, Brian Utes, and we were able to kind of get a lot of things done. We had a very successful trip. We were able to do some things that other companies that had gone out and done the same thing were not. most important thing to me. Nobody got in trouble. We were in the middle of Asia. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. And again, these were 4-man teams. You had a captain, a E7, and 2 E6s just running around in Cambodia, Thailand, wherever. And it was big boy rules, big boy consequences. So it was you're out there kind of doing it. And I had the opportunity to fly out to all these countries, spend some time with each of the teams, go to the embassies with them, review all the things they're doing, run out on missions with them. It was a very rewarding time. Got to spend a month in Nepal trying to start a SIMC mission there. So I worked with the embassy there trying to get something established. Got some great work done in there. We were able to get it going about 6 months after I left. But the groundwork was laid, so it was a ton of fun during that trip. It was I learned so much technical about civil affairs that I didn't really get exposed to prior to that because I was so focused on the combat side of what we were doing with Iraq, Afghanistan, and even the Philippines. So that was a ton of fun. That was my first leadership within civil affairs, like true leadership, where I had, not as significant, but we had, I think, 30 people in the company, something like that. And then, of course, spread all over Asia. So that was it was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. When it was time to, at some point, you and I both have juniors in high school, 16-year-olds. So if I'm doing some math, there's a baby being brought into the world. When does that happen? Where are you? You're at Fort Bragg, I assume, not out in Seattle.
Yeah. So it was a mix. So it was after that. Let's see. I did Iraq, then Afghanistan, then Iraq, and then after that second Iraq trip, I went to the Philippines. So that was my first regional mission where I was, going into Asia. I just got married in January. We left in July to go to the Philippines. I just landed in the Philippines. It took us a few days to get there, stop in a few different places. I called home, check in with the wife, and she's pregnant. So it was,
I'm sorry, what?
It was. I mean, we were hoping that was kind of going to be the case, but I found out there she was pregnant. So I was like, all right, this is awesome. Then I was like, crap, I'm going to be deployed the entire pregnancy, and I really wasn't supposed to be home until after she gave birth. But it worked out. The command that I was with, Devin Lewis and Brad Wallace, great guys. They're like, look, you're going home before your son is due.
How close did you have to get?
They left it up to me. They were like,
Okay.
look, come January you can go home when you want,
Yeah.
Which was awesome. And being in special operations, small units, that type of thing, it was very easy for them to give us that kind of leeway and do those small internal changes. So I did. I left, I think it was the end of January, and then my son was born in the beginning of April. So I had plenty of time, which was great because I got home, prepped a bunch of things for the company, so as they were coming home, all the groundwork that they needed done, somebody was on the ground that they could trust to do it. So I got all that stuff done, and of course was able to help my wife through the last few things that she had to deal with on the back end of the pregnancy. And so my son born in April. In June, we made the trip across country to go to Washington State for first group. So driving across country with a 3-month-old baby was a super exciting trip that I hope nobody ever has to do. It was. We were planning on doing like 3 days to get there, and after the first night in the hotel, I was like, yeah, we're just going. I'm not stopping again. We're gonna go. So I did. I just powered through it. I had to just get it done. So we get there, we do our year there. I do another trip to Afghanistan. I get selected for E8 while I'm there. And of course, because I was selected, they want to pull me back to be a first sergeant, go to the Philippines, all that. So again, we're driving back.
Congrats.
So I drove to Colorado to visit with my brother who was stationed there. And then I put my wife and son on a plane there, sent them back to North Carolina, and then I finished the drive myself. I was like,
Okay.
yeah, you guys don't have to deal with it. Which was great to be able to do.
You didn't have much time in Washington State. Did your wife like it?
Beautiful place. I
Yeah.
mean, Seattle has that really misty rain like very often, and that's
Very
kind of gloomy
green.
and miserable. But it's such a beautiful place. We saw redwoods, which is awesome. And again, I think I had 4 months total on the ground there. For me, I didn't get to do a ton.
Yeah, I didn't ask if you liked it. I
Yeah.
asked if your wife liked it. You didn't have a chance to see it.
And she didn't have too much of a chance either. 'Cause
She's
she had a
still got a
brand
young
new
one.
baby that she was taking care of. Luckily, the guy Dave Henning that I was working with, they worked with me when I was a team sergeant and we went to the Philippines. He was a team leader on a different team, and his wife and my wife were really good friends from that. So we both got to deploy or PCS out to Washington together. So she had Michelle to kind of help her out, which was awesome. And Michelle had a baby around the same time, so those two spent a lot of time together, did a lot of different mom groups and all that. My wife loved the scenery and all that stuff in Washington, but it probably wasn't her favorite place just because it was such a hectic time. Like it was first year, first kid, like so many new things. I wasn't around to help as much as I should be. I was out, playing superhero and doing that stuff. So it was
Okay.
it was a rough year, I think, for both of us. Yeah.
All right, when it came time to separate and retire, how did you do that mental math? What brought you to, civil affairs sounds like State Department would have been a potential, calling spot.
Yeah. So again, I was selected for E9 13 years. I got my first battalion, so I was a battalion command sergeant major at 15 years. Again, crazy fast. So I did one trip there. I think 20 months, 22 months is what I did. And then I was selected to do another one, back to 97 Civil Affairs. I'd been in and out of that unit a bunch of times, so now I get to be a command sergeant major for them. I'm super excited about it.
And how big are these units for?
So in Civil Affairs, the units are fairly small because it's mostly senior people. You have a Civil Affairs team that has a captain, an E7, 2 E6s, all senior people. Company commanders for the companies are majors, first sergeants are E8s. There's about 30 people in a company. You get about 6 companies, so you end up 300-400 people in your organization. So fairly small compared to other units in the Army. So nothing too significant. But I was very excited just to be back leading that battalion because when my first trip, and I'm all over the place with my story because it's just I remember different things. My first trip in Afghanistan, we deployed as Bravo 96. It was just one battalion of Civil Affairs guys active. But they started standing up a brigade, 95th Civil Affairs Brigade, while we were in Afghanistan. So as soon as we touched ground back home after that trip, we turned into Bravo 97th. So I was one of the original people for the 97th Civil Affairs Battalion. So being able to go back there and then lead that battalion was significant for me.
Yeah.
It just, it meant a lot. So doing that, I was very excited, and I told my wife, I said, I'm getting a little wore out. Just my career had been very busy, a bunch of deployments. I wanted to be around my son a lot more. I knew that, once he was 10 and older, it was like really significant that I'm there. So I told her, I said, I'm gonna try to compete for the brigade position. That's really the last position that I'll be around soldiers and I'll be able to help them, take care of them, do all that stuff. Everything after that, yeah, I'm helping soldiers, I'm doing things, but it's more staff. It's more dealing with political side of the Army as opposed to being with the troops and doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I told her I would try for that position. If I get selected for it, that'll be the last thing I do. I didn't get selected for it. It was the first board that I had not been selected for. So mentally, it kind of it hit me a little bit like, damn, I can't believe I didn't get selected. But then I was like, bro, you made it. You were selected first on everything else you did. Like, shut up. So I was happy with that, and I think it was all by design, and that's the way it should have worked out. So when I didn't get selected for that, I said, yeah, I'm absolutely retiring. So I'm going to retire out of the 97 Civil Affairs. I helped stand that place up. I was one of the first people. So I was very excited for that to be my final home. Mm-hmm. And I got to roll with that battalion through a bunch of stuff. That was back when North Korea was doing a lot of stuff, so we were going back and forth to Korea quite a bit. So it was an exciting time to kind of be ending my career, But in the back of my mind, I'm like, things keep going the way they are. I'm not ending anything. I'll be right back where I'm at.
So you get a phone call. Yeah.
So it was a really exciting time. Like I gave it a 50-50. I was like, I don't plan on retiring, but who knows?
Yeah.
So it was really exciting to be able to retire out of the 97th. My team leader I had when I was in the Philippines, his name was Ryan Hansen. He was the battalion commander at the time. So it was like such a small group of people that know each other really close. Being able to retire with those guys. The team I went to Iraq with the second time, Chuck Burns, Mike Rednosi, and Charles Burnett, we all did a retirement ceremony at the same time. We retired at different points throughout the next 2 years, but we decided, because we were such a close element, as a team, 225, we decided, we're going to retire together. So we did. We had a combined ceremony. It was really cool. A bunch of the young guys probably didn't give a shit, but it was, for me, it was awesome. Like, it was fun.
Good. The way it should be.
Yeah.
All right. So why Westboro? How'd you get here?
So I wanted to come back to Massachusetts when I was done. The school systems up here are great. I wanted my son to experience some of what I experienced when I was a kid. I just remembered the patriotism on 4th of July, just everything about Massachusetts. This is where we started as a country. So it was significant for me to bring my family back up here so that they could experience some of what I did when I was a kid. I think my patriotism comes from being a resident of Massachusetts and growing up here. So I wanted my son to experience some of that. So I let my family know this is where I was coming, trying to figure out what I was going to do. I have a sister that lives in Northborough. Her and her husband, they own the house that I rent here in Westboro, so it made perfect sense. Just come here. It's one of the best school districts in the state anyway. So I decided to come here, let my son do school here. If he goes through college here, we'll stay through that. Who knows what I'll do when that's done. But for right now, the reason we're here is all for my son. Schooling, experience, exposure, all that type of stuff.
Your parents still alive?
They are, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they live in Attleboro. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I go down and see them, here and there.
And your brother's still serving, or where is he?
No, he did 3 years, got out. He's back in Attleboro as well.
Okay.
Got a fairly big family. I have a brother in Attleboro, older sister in Attleboro, younger sister in Taunton, younger sister here in Northborough. So 5 of us.
Nice.
Yeah.
Some good cousins for your son.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a huge part of it. Like, I had so much fun with my cousins growing up, just, going out to the cranberry bogs in Middleborough, catching frogs and doing all that crazy stuff. So having him be able to do that with his cousins close by was super important to me.
Okay.
Yeah. And my wife, she's from Florida, so we were on the fence between Florida and Massachusetts. We chose Massachusetts, a lot more family up here. She's got a brother and sister down there. At the time, there was just, her older brother had a couple of kids, that was it. And of course, my family's big. There's a lot of family up here. School system is better, so we chose up here. We said, when I retire for real, then maybe we'll go down to Florida. We'll figure that out. But
Okay.
it's still open on that one.
All right. Well, I think we're getting close towards our time here, but are there have we missed anything? Is there any experience that you want to share, or stands out in your mind as that was awesome?
I'll tell you, I won't get into a ton of the Philippines, but the Philippines was awesome. It was my first trip as a team sergeant, young E7, managing a team out in the middle of nowhere, Philippines. So we were focused on the southern part of Philippines, just coming out of Indonesia. It was the highest Muslim population down in Indonesia, and there was a lot of training camps coming up through that chain of islands up into the Philippines. So we focused, or my team was on an island called Basilan, just south of Mindanao, Zamboanga, and kind of towards the bottom there. We would do these trips on these little boats that you'd swear couldn't make it 10 feet without sinking, but we would do some pretty big trips on them, and we'd go island hopping to visit some of the places we had to go to. And I loved doing it because every time we would sleep on the beach, and it was probably the best sleep. And I can remember it, and I can hear it, like while I'm talking about it. I can just hear the whole thing. being able to wake up on the beach in just such a beautiful place. Yeah, just amazing.
Don't pinch yourself that I'm getting
Yeah.
paid to do this.
Well, it was crazy because there was, one day we were waking up on the beach, all the locals cooked us a huge meal that, more than they're going to have, for the month. So we got to sit there and eat whatever it is, half-cooked eggs, all of it. You got to do it. And then later that day, we're in a firefight on the back of a boat. It's like just such a surreal experience that it's like I was just living in paradise 20 minutes ago. What happened? So it was. That trip was amazing just for that reason, because it was very hard to kind of draw that line between safe, unsafe. We're in a good place, we're not in a good place. But that's why we were there. We had to go to the worst places there to find the bad people and let the Philippine Marine know that, hey, it's okay to go there. Yeah, there's bad people there, but your job is to go there. So we would go there with them and do what we had to do.
Okay.
Fun stuff.
When you talk to your son or your son's friends, do you bring up service and encourage them to serve, or?
So I'll talk to anybody about service, and I always lead with, it's not for everybody, and I do not encourage anybody to go. If they want to go, I'll absolutely support it, and I'll give them the information they need. I will do whatever I can to help them be successful with it. But service to me is one of those things you feel it in your bones and you got to do it, or you don't. And the people that were talked into doing it, or the people that were on the fence and did it, that I served with, you could tell. And it was a very bad experience for those people. And a lot of those people are the ones that struggled the most post-service or post-conflict, coming out of a war zone. They had probably the most damage that I saw. So I try to caution everybody about that. The stuff that you see on TV, the hero moments and all that stuff, it's real to a certain extent, but it's not the same. And people that think, I want that glory side of it, it's different. There is no glory. It's a job to do, and that's it. So I try to make that real for people that ask me about it, and I let them know that it's a hard life. It is not an easy life at all. I don't regret a second of my service. I'm absolutely thrilled that I'm done with it, but I don't regret anything. And I don't want somebody to put themselves in a position where they're going to regret serving. And I think that's what we owe that next generation that are going in, to help them pick the job. So if service is something they absolutely have to do, but they're kind of on a side that, combat's probably not the right thing for you, help them pick a job that would help them serve, but in a way that is not going to damage them further, or in a way that's, going to make their life miserable.
No, you bring up a great point that we have an all-volunteer force, and I've wrestled with the concept of encouraging people to serve.
Yeah.
I felt it still do from I think everyone should, that's part of society, and you ought to find your spot to it, whether or not be in a uniform. Not sure. So the all-volunteer force is a powerful thing, and it's pretty awesome to have been a part of it. It makes for the people that you work with some awesome,
absolutely
high caliber, squared away and fun. But you're right, the job's not always easy. Job's not always fun.
Yeah.
And there are sacrifices both by the member, but also by the family.
Yeah. And a point you just brought up, it's very important that everybody remembers, you can serve, it doesn't have to be in a uniform. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you 100%. I feel that every American should serve in some capacity. It does not have to be in a uniform. I think I learned so much about our country and about our history and about myself through serving that I think there's so much value there that people can get. And again, it doesn't have to be in a uniform. It can be in so many different ways.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that could be a better cap. So thank you for your service, past tense, Present tense, you serve on the Westboro Veterans Advisory Board. You're about to be a volunteer coach. You hang out with the WASA crew during the row. You've donated some teaching and classes with CrossFit. So you still continue to serve, and I'm confident that that is built into your makeup and DNA. So you will do it in the future. So thank you for sharing your background with us. Hopefully it was a decent time, and then I'll close up out to the audience. So.
Awesome.
As we wrap up today's session, I'd like to remind our audience that our Veteran Service Officer, Jeff Farrell, maintains an office on the first floor of the Town Hall, and whose contact information can be seen on the screen at the end of today's show. Both he and your Veterans Advisory Board are here to help guide you to the resources and benefits that your uniformed service may have earned. I'd also like to remind residents that Westboro's Veterans Day ceremony will take place on Tuesday, November 11th at 10:30 in front of the Forbes Building. Westboro's Veteran of the Year, Paul Keaveney, Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps, will be giving a short presentation. Finally, I'd like to thank Westboro Television for their continued support in putting this Veterans Corner together. And of course, a big thank you to today's guest, Tony Pittman. Until next time, thanks for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful week. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Halloween. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.